Good evening and welcome to the Late Debate. Tonight, the London MP occupying the hottest seat in Labour's shadow cabinet, and later a panel of capital politicians with some sage advice for London's new mayor. But first, Islington MP Emily Thornberry, the Shadow Defence Secretary who is no slouch when it comes to defending her own reputation.
We do face an extraordinary opposition team. The Shadow Business Secretary is anti-business.
David Cameron in full attack mode yesterday, targeting Labour's front bench. The Shadow Defence Secretary's response can't be heard, but her lips can be read.
The Shadow Defence Secretary doesn't believe in defence, and they are led by a proud...
Emily Thornberry appeared to mouth not once but twice a word rarely heard in Parliament. The Islington MP is no stranger to saying what she thinks, notoriously in this tweet mocking White Van Man in a Kent by-election in 2014. In the fallout, she lost her job as Ed Miliband's Shadow Attorney General.
Respect is the basic rule of politics, and I'm afraid her tweet conveyed a sense of disrespect. And, you know, I think there's nothing unusual or odd, as her tweet implied, about having England flags in your window.
I made a mistake, I've resigned, and if I've upset anyone or insulted anybody, I apologise.
Thornberry has been the Labour MP for Islington South and Finsbury since 2005. Not long after, she trained for a 400-kilometre Arctic trek with other MPs. The charity fundraising effort involved being pulled by huskies through daylight and at night.
I haven't got any night vision. I don't think I ate enough carrots when I was a kid or something. But I just couldn't. I kept going off in the wrong direction.
Thornberry's neighbouring MP in Islington North would one day come to her rescue, plucking her from backbench exile in January and appointing her to the senior post of Shadow Defence Secretary, although she seemed a little puzzled.
I don't know why Jeremy gave me this job, but I know that I'm really honoured to be doing it.
Well, Emily Thornberry joins me in the studio. The first thing that struck me about watching that footage from the Commons yesterday was there's a question. Did you challenge authority when you were at school?
What am I supposed to say to that?
Well, yes or no?
Yeah. I probably wasn't the sort of person I would like to teach.
And yesterday, I mean, are you in trouble for that?
I don't think so. I think when David Cameron was first became Prime Minister, he said that he wanted to end Punch and Judy politics. But within a few weeks, he had really changed his tune. And I think that you just get Bullingdon Boy, you just get Flashman in the House of Commons these days at Prime Minister's questions. And he spends his time routinely insulting members of the Labour Party.
Two wrongs don't make a right,
No, but I'm just saying this tone is actually set by him. And the difficulty is that week after week, you know, some of us, you know, get insulted by him. There's nothing we can say. And, you know, frankly, when I'm told that I don't know anything about defence or don't care about defence, it does make me cross.
You have now been doing the job for 4 months. How's it going?
Yeah. It's a really interesting job.
I mean, let's face it, you didn't really know a lot about defence when you started, did you?
Well, I'd never been in the armed forces. I have family past and present in the armed forces. My father was a peacekeeper. I had done a number of court-martials. In fact, I was given the honorary title of Lieutenant Colonel because of the work that I'd done with the armed forces. So I'm not quite such a sort of, you know, black and white figure as people think that I am. I actually have quite a lot more experience than people think.
You're in charge of the Defence Review.
Yes.
Where's that going? What have you found out?
So what I'm doing is it's Labour Party policy for us to have a review. Obviously, we hope that we'd be doing this in government, but we're not. But it is important that we look at 21st century threats to Britain and the best response to them. So what I'm doing is I'm doing a review that will take as long as it takes, but I'm trying to make sure that I publish an interim review in May or June that will feed into the party's policy-making process.
You famously, of course, like Jeremy Corbyn, are unilateralists. A large number of the Parliamentary Labour Party favour Trident, favour an independent nuclear deterrent. How do you square that circle?
Well, I think, first of all, in the 1980s, my mum went to Greenham Common and I didn't go with her because I didn't think at that stage that it was right for us to lose our nuclear weapons. When there was the vote in 2007 on whether we should have the successor class, I voted against it. So I don't think it's quite right. I think this kind of unilateralist, multilateralist actually isn't really a very meaningful term these days. I think what's important is that before we make such a big decision about whether or not we make the single biggest investment choice that this government's going to make, that we look at all the options and we look to see, how much is it going to cost, which they won't tell us at the moment. How much will it cost to maintain? How much will it cost to get rid of the previous boats? And will it be meeting the 21st century threats? And also, given that these submarines won't hit the water until the 2030s and will be expected to defend us until the 2060s, will they be out of date during that period?
You were mocked a little by some of your Labour Party colleagues for talking about drones being able to take on nuclear submarines. Have you revised your thoughts on that?
No, the point I was trying to make was that at the moment people say that the Rolls-Royce of nuclear deterrence is to have them on submarines that can hide in the oceans and they will not be able to be found. The question is, will 21st century technology overtake that? So there are a number of threats to submarines, and actually, although at the moment submarines can hide in the oceans and no one can see them, fleets of drones connected to some of the satellite technology, there is a series of different threats to the submarines, and actually the Chinese, the Russians, the Americans are investing billions in this technology, and it is expected that they will reap some rewards from that. So the question is, if we're betting the farm on 4 nuclear submarines, is that the right thing to do?
We saw you in the Commons yesterday during the Queen's speech. Among the measures mentioned by the government was talk about modern transport, driverless cars, drones delivering things around the country, spaceports. What do you think of all that?
Well, I think that it is, we have to be on our toes, as I say. I think that life is changing, and I think that, personally, I would rather have, if we were involved in a battle, I would rather have a drone being responsible for an attack than sort of 4 frightened 19-year-olds. I think that, if drone technology can keep our people safe and can do what we want to do, I don't have a problem with it. We have to make sure that we're clear about the law. We have to make sure that we're implementing the law properly and we're doing it within the confines of that. But actually, I think that we should take advantage of all new technology, That's the way warfare has always been. You just take advantage of what's coming around the corner, and you do your best not to fight the previous wars. You have to look at how warfare is going to change.
You're a lawyer by training.
Yes.
You know about the human rights issues involved with drones being used to attack civilian targets. That's a difficult one, isn't it?
Well, the difficulty is not the drones. The drones are just, there's a little bit of a distraction. The question is in what circumstances can you go after someone and kill them when they're not in a combat zone? So it has to be that the threat is imminent, and it has to be a direct attack or direct threat to Britain. And I think that the government needs to be quite clear about the legal basis on which they are making these attacks, because the last thing we want is members of our armed forces hauled up before the criminal courts.
And are you happy with the accounts given by the Prime Minister so far, where drones have been used to take out so-called enemy targets?
I think that it's very unclear the basis on which they're doing some of the actions. So we need to be clearer than we are, and I think that it is incumbent on the government, for the sake of the armed forces, if for nobody else, than to be clear upon which the basis on which they're giving these instructions.
We're going to be talking a little later in the programme about the new Mayor of London. You're obviously very excited, very pleased to see him there.
Yeah.
How do you think he's doing after a few days?
I think he's doing pretty well. I'm so proud of him.
And one of the things that's happened is he's been involved in a spat with Donald Trump. That's certainly raised his international profile. Do you think he's likely to make an appearance alongside Hillary Clinton in the Democratic Convention in Philadelphia later this year?
I've no idea. It's a big job being Mayor of London. I imagine he'll be very busy, but if Hillary wants him there, I'm sure he'll take up the invitation.
And you presumably were among the many who were cheering when he beat Zach Goldsmith.
So much.
Emily Thornberry, thank you very much for coming in. It's been good to talk to you. You've been in on this programme many times before, but it's good to see you in your new role as Shadow Defence Secretary. Thank you for talking to us. Now, it's 2 weeks since Sadiq Khan triumphed in London's mayoral election, winning back the capital for Labour after 8 years of Boris in City Hall. It was a bruising election, but he's hit the ground running.
This is your chance to ask me, the Mayor of London, anything you want.
London's new mayor added another string to his bow this week, radio phone-in host.
You can call me on 0345 6060973.
My name is Sadiq Khan and I'm the Mayor of London.
The past 2 weeks have moved at breakneck speed for the capital's first citizen, whose mission statement became his mantra.
I want to be Mayor for all Londoners.
It's not unusual for new regimes to try to trash the old one. 8 years ago, newly elected Boris Johnson launched an audit into sleaze and misspending under his predecessor, Ken Livingstone.
What we want to do is get to the bottom of what's been going wrong.
The new mayor was no different, launching an audit into Boris Johnson's affordable housing legacy.
I've been shocked by the findings. The cupboard is bare.
Then the new mayor accused the old one of keeping secret a damning report on pollution outside London's schools.
Well, I'm hoping there aren't any more skeletons buried in City Hall.
He also threw a spanner in the works of one of the government's pet projects, High Speed 2, suggesting the southern terminus at Euston should be put on hold.
In the interim, it's possible for there to be a station at Old Oak Common, really good links with Crossrail, really good links with Heathrow Airport.
Of course, Sadiq Khan has been on the receiving end of some hostile volleys from Conservatives in recent weeks.
He shared a platform with an extremist who called for Jews to be drowned in the ocean.
He got his revenge at the ballot box.
I therefore declare Sadiq Khan to be elected as the new Mayor of London.
Let me again congratulate Sadiq Khan for his victory and say how much we're looking forward to working with him on the issues that matter to Londoners, whether it's transport or housing or keeping London safe.
To help the new mayor, we've convened our own Capital Brains Trust to offer some advice on priorities and policies for the next 4 years. Representing Labour, the Brent Central MP, Dawn Butler, who you saw in that report cheering. For the Conservatives, former London Assembly member, who's now Bromley and Chislehurst MP, Bob Neal. And for the Greens, the recently retired, although not really retired, London Assembly member, Baroness Jenny Jones. Welcome, all of you. Bob, first of all, were you ashamed of the Tory campaign?
I wasn't ashamed, no. I think they were legitimate questions and it's proper to ask them. But at the end of the day now, we respect the result and we're going to move on and work constructively with the mayor.
Would you say the advice should be next time never do a campaign like that again?
I think what's important is that we recognise that there should be no go areas where serious issues are concerned, but equally we want to make sure that we're talking about the real issues that are important to Londoners consistently. And perhaps it was a problem that some issues rather took over the debate, whereas in fact I think there was a strong case that we could have made on other really important issues like the financing of London, getting London's budget right, making sure that we get our transport system properly funded. I didn't want to see those things get crowded up.
And Dawn, you would agree that there are legitimate questions to ask, certainly in areas like transport funding. I mean, that's one of the big question marks on Sadiq's regime, isn't it?
Well, it would be great if we stuck to the politics and asked legitimate questions rather than, and you asked Bob just now about the campaign and the fact that you don't want to denounce that campaign, I think is disappointing because the Queen's speech that's written by David Cameron yesterday, she said, my government will sort of unify and have a cohesive country, and that campaign was anything but that. And I just think humility is what's needed from the government and from the Prime Minister if they're ever to be taken seriously in regards to community cohesion. But yes, of course, legitimate questions on regards to transport. But as you can see, Sadiq came in, one of the first things he did was say, I promised you that we would have this hopper ticket, and exactly what he's done, and by September it will be up and running.
Jenny, of course, you stood to be Mayor of London. Not this time, but previous time. Was this a dirtier campaign than the ones you've been involved in the past?
Oh, definitely. I mean, this was a disgusting campaign, and I think the Tories should be ashamed of themselves. It was not a fit campaign to run in a city like London, which is so multicultural, and we rely on all the different ethnicities and cultures for excitement and for vibrancy, and to run a campaign like that I thought was absolutely disgusting. Asking legitimate questions is one thing, but slagging somebody off consistently through the media and in Parliament I thought was absolutely inappropriate. And in a way it's part of the same thing that's happening with the EU referendum. It's all about personalities and gossip and innuendo and lies, and not about the policies.
Yeah, because what it does is it alienates people.
Yeah.
And what this government's doing is alienating people, and exactly that we don't. And thank goodness the people in London, voted against the campaign, the hate campaign that the government ran.
I think that's an excessive characterisation. There's nothing wrong with asking straight questions. And genuinely, Dawn, you and I both believe in cohesion in our capital city, but you don't do that by having any policy no-go areas or any issues around judgment.
It wasn't about a no-go area. I mean, at the end of the day, Cameron then apologised to the person that he called an extremist, right? He apologised, but yet still he hasn't apologised to the person who he accused of sitting on the stage with an extremist who was running for elected office and was voted as Mayor of London. So therefore, if he can apologise on one level, he needs to apologise on the other level. If you want to
if
you want to move on, apologise and then we'll move on.
I don't agree, John, because there's a difference between a factual error which you can correct, and a legitimate question about somebody's judgment. Okay, we asked that question. The voters have made their decision. Now we go forward,
at the end of the day,
and we have to hold Sadiq to account for what he's actually doing.
It's left a nasty taste, though, hasn't it? It has left a nasty taste, that campaign.
I can remember London campaigns over the years have often been pretty rough and tough. You know, this is a pretty vibrant,
one of the things I want
city
to
politics.
hear from Bob and from Jenny, they're both City Hall stalwarts. What is your advice to the new mayor as somebody who knows the ropes? Jenny, first of all.
Well, I think actually he's made a good start. I'm really quite impressed. I think the Hopper ticket was a good start, and also he's been, for example, the HS2 stuff in Euston. That's a really tricky problem, and he's right to bring attention to it. There's other things that I want him to say. For example, estate regeneration. He's committed, because of the last mayor, to all sorts of deals and projects that I'm very concerned about. He has said he will listen to residents, and I hope he does that and doesn't listen to developers the way Boris did.
Boris, Bob, what do you say that Sadiq should do?
First of all, he's got to be realistic about what can be delivered. I think we're already seeing that he's beginning to realise that, for example, he may have a hole in his transport budget that's going to have to be plugged. If he does that sensibly, well and good. The other thing that's really important, I think, across the piece, is learning to work with the boroughs. Because London, of course, it has a very important role for the mayor, but the London boroughs deliver an awful lot of the day-to-day services for Londoners. And in the past, we've had, going back many years, bits of antagonism between London-wide government and the London boroughs. So any mayor, or shrewdly...
That's because the government's been cutting all the funding for the local boroughs. That's why there's problems.
No, not at all. Because, actually, the rows that existed, I can remember, perhaps long before you were in politics, arguments between Labour GLCs and Labour boroughs, going back to the time even before Horace Cutler won it for the Conservatives. There is a long history of tension, and you can only make that work if you show respect for the boroughs. Now, Sadiq Khan, in my judgment, is a practical man. Let's hope he works with the boroughs. But he won't deliver for London unless he has all the boroughs, regardless of party, on side.
From what you've seen, do you like the cut of his jib?
Well, let's see what he comes up with. I think he made some undeliverable promises. His promises around funding of transport, I don't think are going to be able to be delivered, and I think he's going to have to be realistic about delivering his housing. We all know that housing needs to be increased in London, but the idea that you're going to be able to deliver 50% affordable on every site is, I think anyone knows London housing market, unrealistic. He'll have to rethink how he gets there.
Dawn, we've already seen him row back on his housing promises. He's now saying that he can't deliver the 50,000 new homes, half of them affordable, immediately. It's not going to happen overnight and probably will take the duration of his mayoralty. That's a U-turn already, isn't it?
Well, I think it's unrealistic to think that it could happen overnight, number one. So he hasn't rowed back or done a U-turn. What he's done is, and Bob has said, he's looked at the books, because he's a man of detail. So he looks at the books, the cupboards are bare. Boris has made a mess up of literally everything in regards to this housing. He's under-delivered on every level. And what Sadiq said... Ken Livingstone did a lot better than Boris. Yes, Boris inherited a London that was, he was getting the Olympics, he was getting the bikes. Boris inherited a vibrant London. Sadiq has inherited a London where Boris did literally nothing but implement what Ken had put into the pipeline. So what Sadiq has said is, yes, he's going to get 50% of housing built. It's going to take long. It's not going to happen overnight, but he's going to fast track some of the building sites where, the TfL own, for instance. He's going to fast track some of that and get the houses built. He's the sort of last stop. So we're like, I've got development going on in Wembley. He's going to look at that development and make sure there's genuinely affordable houses built, which is a good
Jenny,
thing.
you know the City Hall inside out. Is it going to be that easy for him?
It's quite hard to build enough houses to meet demand. It's always going to be difficult. But of course, he's got to be careful about the land that he uses. He's got to make sure that he doesn't sell it too cheaply if he's selling it to developers. There's all sorts of issues about this. Also, the definition of affordable. Boris, one of the first things he did was put up the definition of affordable to 60% of market price from Ken's 40%. Well, that's not fair. I'd like to see Sadiq talk about some social housing. I haven't heard much of that. And also, he's making the right noises on air pollution, on dealing with air pollution. But quite honestly, he said he's going to move the ULEZ a bit wider. He's got to do the whole of London. And he's also got to deal with that report that talked about the pollution outside schools.
The one that Boris hit.
Exactly,
yes. Do you think, Bob, well, presumably the answer is no, but that he can freeze the fares without damaging transport?
I don't see how he can. At the end of the day, if you look at position of my constituents. What we really want is to get those southeastern train services taken under Transport for London, which I think is a good thing, and that needs real investment. He's not going to be able to do that with a hole in the books.
This. The Mayor has the power if he wants to do it. He can do it. He's already persuaded Mike Brown to come out publicly and say, yes, we can do this fares freeze, this 4-year fares freeze.
Yeah, and let's see what then happens going forward.
But
it's a very attractive policy, but something will give at the end of the day.
You believe that. You'd like to see a fares freeze, but you believe something will suffer.
I think something will suffer because it's good to freeze fares because they have gone up far too fast. But at the same time, we also want a lot of investment. He's got to find the money somewhere. Absolutely. He's got to raise the congestion charge, for example, or make sure that the air pollution zone people have to pay enough for that. He can raise the money, but he's got to be realistic that he needs to.
Dawn, how can you guarantee that if we're going to have this fares freeze, that we're not going to go back to the 1970s, of the clapped out London Underground with the escalators that don't work because we can't afford to repair them?
Because Sadiq cares about London.
So he might care, but if he hasn't got the money...
But he'll find the money to make it work. London's not going to stand still. So there's different ways you can do it. So if you look at, for instance, the buses, okay, and Boris had this vanity project with the buses. He spent a load of money on buses that are polluting the air, you know, and all of that sort of stuff is just wasted money, thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds. So there's money to be had if you cut the wastage, and that's something that Sadiq's looking at the books, cutting the wastage, moving on, make sure that money is spent effectively on things that work in London. And he is increasing the air pollution zone. It's going to include
Can I just briefly ask you one question?
Of course.
Tory government, Labour Mayor, first time. I'm going to ask all three of you very briefly. Can it work without punch-ups?
There'll probably be punch-ups, and yes, it can work.
It can work with goodwill, but he's going to have to be realistic. And if he starts coming back and putting up the council tax, which is the only way he's really going to raise money, then I think it'll be Londoners that object. The government will work constructively, but he's got to keep all of Londoners on side. I'm not convinced yet.
Jenny, what do you think? Can it work?
Sadiq is a tough customer. I think he's going to talk hard to the government, but I think at the same time they both know that they've got to come to some accommodation.
Jenny, Bob, Dawn, thank you very much indeed for coming in and talking to us. We shall look forward with interest to what Sadiq delivers. That's all for now. I'll be back in June with our European referendum debate special. Until then, good night and thank you very much for watching us.